Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Forte. I'm the Senior Vice President at NICE. I'm here today with Robin. Robin, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, Joe, and everybody who's watching today. I'm Robin Garris. I'm CEO of Metrigy. We're a research and advisory firm, and happy to be here today to talk about a very important topic.
Well, thanks for taking the time, Robin, to hang out with us today.
Yeah.
Today, we wanted to talk about the challenges facing U.S. higher education. I know that you've done a lot of research in that space, in that area, and would love to hear some insights from you.
Yeah, I mean, I just think from a high level, I would say there's a lot of challenges going on with higher education right now that have absolutely nothing to do with technology, although there are some with technology that we'll get to. But just think about enrollment. It is an issue when you look at the National Center for Education Statistics, and their look at enrollment in post-secondary, educational institutions in the United States. It's dropped from 15%, or not from, it's dropped 15% from 2010 to 2021. So that's a big drop. And education is competitive. Let's not make any bones about it there. I mean, it's competitive. People want to get the best and brightest into their universities, colleges, any sort of, post-secondary place. Now, you also have birth rates dropping. So from 2025, projected out to 2029, the number of 18-year-olds is also projected to drop by about 15%. So, now we have less people to even start with. And, I think that's an issue. The other problem I would say we see with education, higher education in particular, is spending. And spending specifically in what I'll call customer experience, but it's really student experience, or like, if we were looking at healthcare, it'd be like patient experience. It's the customers of this vertical. So when you look at education, it's adapting technology at fairly close rates of other institutions for like the student experience. And that's likely the result of a lot of technology vendors offering pretty steep discounts to educational institutions. But when you look at overall spending, it's way below other industries. So education spending about 1.1% of its operating budget on CX technologies compared to the average, which is about 2.8%. So if you look at that, if you want to normalize that data and look at it by dollars per employee, in education, it's about $957 per employee, whereas all industries combined, it's about $33.50 per employee. So big difference there. Not a lot of money going into, relatively speaking anyway, going into the technologies that can really help make that student experience a lot better. So I mean, they're and when you look at where they're spending the money, I mean, they're actually slightly ahead of other industries in their contact center platform, their customer relationship management applications, their workforce optimization, but they're notably behind on AI spending, and to a lesser degree, some like student-facing apps. But that AI spending, they're far behind, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? Like kind of ironic, because there's so much research happening at universities about AI. There's degrees on AI, but the way they're using it to interact with their students or their potential students of the future is a lot lower. And I guess the last thing I would say before we talk more about the technologies themselves is that a lot of universities are still lacking, or colleges or universities, still lacking what we would consider to be like a chief customer officer, a chief experience officer. Only about 22% of universities or colleges actually have one, compared to about 30% of all companies. And that number, by the way, is going up this past year. We're really starting to see that hiring happen. And I think a lot of that is because of AI and generative AI in particular. But if you don't have somebody in the institution who's really responsible for that student experience from a technology interaction perspective, you're not going to really be investing in the technology. You're not going to know what's possible. What are some of the potentials, and how can this move some of our metrics in getting enrollment up and getting more students on the on the docket there. Yeah.
Well, those are great insights. Thanks for sharing those with us. Can you talk a little bit more about what you think is going to happen as far as spending goes? You said the spending is pretty low. You see that increasing?
Yeah. At this point, we're seeing a slight increase, but it's not keeping pace with the rest of the industries. Now, what I think might change that is, I guess more hiring of these chief customer officers, like I've talked about. So if you've got more high level people within university or college settings that can say, oh wow, if we adopt this technology, we might be able to increase enrollment, or help retain more students so that they're not going to transfer out, things like that. But we have to have the people who are focused on that technology, and right now we don't have them by and large. Now, I think the other thing that might happen is competitively, you'll start seeing some universities really use it to a really good extent, and then their competitors are going to see it and say, wait a minute, what are they doing that's, causing them to have these great numbers and us not to? So that's an issue. And I mean, I really do think that, there are a lot of technology solutions available today, for education in every vertical, really. And I think that it will help a lot of these facilities, sort of push toward that better CX or student, SX, student X strategy. And, I think AI is going to play a big role in this. We just need to get education there. And I'm going to throw a question back out to you, Joe. And I think, when I look at schools, like how do you, like at NICE, for example, how do you think that they can leverage tools that you might offer that can help them to be more proactive, more analytical, more responsive to their students, and also to enable them to better kind of evaluate and address those individual student engagement levels? Because I think we've all found that when students are more engaged, they're more successful, and they're less engaged, they're not. And if we can get to them in the right technology that makes sense for them, they become more successful, more engaged, and just a better outcome overall for the university and the students. So I want to, see what you thought about some of that, and what NICE offers as we start maybe talking about some of the technology.
Sure. It's an interesting space to be working in. The education organizations, universities, they're just filled with so many smart people that really know what they're doing. They typically have been in the roles for many, many years.
Yeah.
Really, really understand what the students' needs are, how enrollment works. They understand the processes very well. So when we approach them with these new AI tools, it's different than when we approach some of our other types of customers. The university customers tend to be very engaged. They want to understand how it works, what's the pieces behind it, what's the data come from, what's the knowledge base contained, how do you build a knowledge base? So they're very interested in seeing what's behind the mirror, or what's behind the cloud, or behind the screen, which enables us to have really deep conversations with our customers or potential customers. And we see them really thinking through the long term, what can we do with this technology to make the student's life better? What can we do to help our university be better at what it does, educating students, keeping students safe? So it's been a very been a learning experience for me as I go out and I talk to these leaders within the university systems and learn about what their cares are and how important it is for them to make sure that when they make a decision on AI, it's the right decision. It's going to really help them out as much as possible. The ROI is a little bit different, right? The ROI for them is not really based on the money side of it. Yeah. The ROI for them is the student experience. Are we going to be able to allow our students to engage correctly through the university system? Are we going to have good outcomes from these students? Are they going to be able to leave the university and be productive? That's what the thoughts come from AI and how they can enable that properly.
Yeah, and I mean, you definitely see them interested in the technology, of course. By nature, you're in a university, you want to learn about everything new. And but like I said, in our data, we still see them a little bit slower in adopting than other industries. And I'm just curious as to if you have any thoughts on why that might be. I mean, I know in other industries, some of it's just competition driving it. Like, oh, if our competitors do, we got to do this so we stay, we don't lose customers. But honestly, I mean, even in a university setting, you don't want to lose your students either. And students these days are so into their technology and so into automation and saving time and making things easier, which is exactly what AI does. So I do think it's kind of important for the universities to just act on this and move forward. And I know a lot of with universities, it's cyclical. Like it's very hard to implement a new technology as the fall starts, and getting people ramped up, and then you've got this little window before you have to start thinking about the next year, so you kind of have more windows, I think, in universities than you do in other industries as to when you can even adopt this technology, because they're so focused on making sure students get onboarded correctly and, everything's going well for the next year then.
Yeah, I see it's in the evaluation process seems to maybe be the long pole in the tent, where they
Okay.
really want to understand what the processes are. They really want to understand the solution set. They
Yeah.
want to make sure that it doesn't disrupt the way that they interact with their students today. In many contact center space, there's agents, but in the higher education space, they're really counselors. When a student calls into a contact center, they're being counseled, and they want to make sure they maintain that level. The counseling is the same, that AI doesn't come in and disrupt that workflow. So it's a very interesting process that they evaluate AI and how it's going to work in their environment. I think that's maybe what's slowing it down a bit. But many universities we're working with today are really ready to make that change. And I think over the next 12 months, we're going to see a lot of that adoption.
Yeah, see some leapfrogging take place, but that is a good point about them being counselors. I mean, if you look at like an alumni association, I mean, those are more traditional contact center agents that are in there, reaching out and maybe soliciting from the alumni. So that's more like your traditional agent contact center. But you're right, like when students are calling in, it is more of a consultative approach, one that probably in many cases does better with video. I don't, it's not necessarily AI focused like what I want to talk about a little bit more here, but video is good for consultative discussion, so maybe getting that into place, but also trying to find those use cases where like a chatbot or a virtual agent, does make sense for them, if they can have a very intelligent virtual agent gather information about their preferences or their plans at the university or the degree, it can very easily, and sometimes even quicker than a human, come up with a proposed schedule or, here are the classes that make sense for you. And that might be a faster way and honestly a more preferable way for students or prospective students to start looking at their either first semester schedule or ongoing schedules is, okay, all this about me, what I've done, how, and even as time goes on, okay, AI, how I've performed in all my classes now. Where do you think I would get the most value out of my class schedule for the next semester? Maybe I was thinking about these 5 classes, but you're saying, yeah, 2 of them are great, but these other three will be way better for you based on how well you've done in your, in your grades and the classes you took in these last 3 semesters, So I think that there could be a lot of really cool use cases. I was even thinking of things like, like in a freshman dorm, if you have dietary restrictions or dietary preferences, and you can go to different dorm cafeterias, to have AI be able to tell you very easily, here's what you should eat today. Here's some good foods that you can eat today that will match what your dietary requirements are. So things like that are very easy use cases that don't ruin that consultative relationship like you were talking about, which I agree. And by the way, that consultative relationship gets even better with AI. You start using technologies like AI Agent Assist with those consultative conversations, and oh my gosh, those get way better because now you've got that, that admissions advisor or your class counselor, your scheduling counselor talking to you. Maybe you want to have that live discussion, and that counselor now has an assistant, a virtual assistant, basically helping to move this call along and also give some enlightenment, give some information that maybe neither of the 2 humans on the call would have thought of, but AI doing calculations in the background has thought of that,
Absolutely. We're consulting with a lot of universities today that are looking at, remember, IoT was a big thing a couple of years ago, Internet of Things, and everything was going to have some connection to something. And now it's coming full circle where they're understanding, okay, wait a minute, I have all of these disparate systems within the university, right? It can be facilities, it could be the dining halls, it could be the dorms, it could be athletic ticketing, it could be clubs. All of these different things have some mechanism of connecting. So the university is now getting very smart, looking at it, saying, wait a minute, if I could connect all of these together, what can I get out of this? And how do I make this help my student experience, right? So what they're doing is they're collecting all of this data together, building a bus. There's a system that we use that we connect all of these things together, and we're starting to build out profiles of what a good student looks like, right? What
Oh, cool.
if you have a good student, meaning C, B, A, you depend on what kind of school you're in, what you want the gates to be, but you could set those up. You start to look at the student's health, mental health through some of these applications as well. If you think about it, one of the journeys that we've been talking about is when a student is not interacting with the university, they find
Yep.
that the attrition rate is pretty high, right? And it takes about 18 months for someone to attrition out. So it's pretty costly for the universities. And most of these students leave because they feel disengaged from the university, they don't feel part of it. So what if
Isolated.
we take all these IoT devices, connect them together, and start to look at a profile of a student, right? If a student leaves their dorm 4 times a day, that's a good sign. If they're only leaving twice a day, it's a bad sign. Are they going to the cafeteria? Are they checking in the cafeteria every day, or is it every other day? So to start to look at some of these things, they could even look at things like, am I going to a football game or a volleyball game, right? Am I buying tickets, or am I getting tickets and being part of the university? And it starts to look at those things. It starts to tabulate those together, and we can start to see, hey, there's an opportunity here to get out and talk to a potential issue before it happens with a student, right? I can go do a door knock if they're not meeting certain criteria. And then you can take that even further with, you said earlier, is assigning classes, right? If I'm in a dorm on the east side of campus and I'm a freshman and all my classes are on the west side of campus, maybe I can change that. Maybe I can look at, as a university, I can move some of those classes closer to where my students are, so they'd be more engaged and more part of the system and the processes.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, specific to some of the technologies, I'll give you some of the data that we're seeing in our research, and some of it looks really good for universities. Some of it they are a little bit behind, but I think you're right. I mean, I think they will catch up as they're evaluating the technology and they see what it can do for them. One of the areas where we see universities doing well, it kind of goes to what you were just talking about, Joe, and that is like sort of we call it voice of the customer in general, generically, but voice of the student programs. And about 78% of colleges and universities are doing this today, which is aligned with the rest of every industry. But what they're doing better than other industries is they're acting on the feedback much more than other industries. So 89% of them are actually acting on that feedback, whereas I think it's like 64% of all industries are doing that action. So I think that is a really good thing. To me, as a data geek, I just love that, because you're out there and you're gathering data from your students and you're trying to do something with that data. So like in the university and college environment, they're doing things like sharing feedback with employees. So we're getting this feedback. Let's let the employees know. Let's not keep it hidden. Let's let them know, where are you doing well, where are you not doing well, and let's work for improvement. Let's work for collective improvement and individual improvement. The other thing they do very well is they add that feedback to any sort of automated workflows that they might have. So, and they are definitely doing some automated workflows for sure. And just letting that feedback guide some of that automation and maybe make some changes to the automation. And then they're also incorporating it into online training. So whether that's an agent in an alumni contact center, or whether that's a counselor for a student, we do see some universities now adding in this sort of AI-enabled training for any of those people, where they take that voice of the student feedback and just present that to them in chart format, in recommendation format, and so on. So I think that is something that's really going quite well. Voice is actually the most used channel. Voice, as all the different interaction channels that we have out there to interact with any customer, student, or patient, or whatever, voice is always the most used channel. In education, it's way more used, even more so than any other area. And it's interesting to me because when we look at some of the younger generations, they are very open to using other technologies like web chat, like business messaging services, like video screen sharing, SMS, any of the different, even voice bots and chatbots. That said, when we look at Gen Z, things are getting a little different with that generation. They actually really, really like voice and video. So they're kind of going back to, they're kind of aligning in a lot of ways toward much older generations. They like that interaction. They like that in person. But I think what's different about Gen Z or other generations is that they really understand when to use what channel, whereas other generations didn't. I think the Gen Zs know, all right, look, I just need to change a class. I don't need to talk to somebody. I need to be able to go online and do this. Can I go to a chat bot and just tell them what I need to do and get it done? And now maybe it's, boy, I'm really struggling right now with a mental health issue. I don't want a bot. I want to talk to a counselor. So they know, and I know those are two extreme examples, but even more granularly, they know when to use a different channel. So I think that, just offering a lot of channels and educating students on what's available, how can they talk? I think that's one of the biggest problems of most organizations, regardless of verticals. They have technologies and interaction channels available, but nobody knows it because the organization, they're expecting IT to market that. Well, IT people are not marketing people. And I always kind of laugh about that. Like, why do we want IT people to market? They're not good at it, in the same way that marketing people probably aren't very good at spinning up a new server, So I think we need to kind of look at that, get some of the marketing people, the communications people, the university communications people, to get the word out to people, here to students and prospective students. Here are all the different ways we can interact with you. We do already see companies using virtual assistants for students in self-service, so things like collecting information, aligning with course availability, like I talked about, guiding them on requirements, payments, that type of thing. And about more than two-thirds of schools are actually using them right now. And when they do that, they actually show an 11% boost in student satisfaction rates. So the students want this. And they know when to use it. So I think that that's something that maybe, the people making these decisions need to think about. The students in colleges now are much more tech savvy in a lot of ways than the people making the decisions about the technology. I hate to say it, but don't you? I don't know. What do you think, Joe? I kind of see that.
Yeah, you named a lot of things there, right? First thing you started talking about was feedback, and I think that's really important, right? I do believe the universities are really good at understanding feedback and acting on it. And part of it, I think, is when you go to a university, you go into their contact center, a lot of the people in there are students. So they've lived that experience. They're part of that experience. And I think that helps accelerate some of the change in that space, right? And then the other thing you mentioned about the omni-channel, yeah, absolutely. They know how to use the channel that really is appropriate for that particular task. And when you talk about universities, you go back to they're not really agents, they're counselors.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want to chat with a counselor, you want to talk to a counselor, at least it seems that way. So I think that's a lot of that adoption and why it's so important to have good counselors sitting at those seats when someone calls in, asks for a question or has a question. And then the last thing you mentioned about self-service, right? Self-service, of course, has become just the absolute necessity. You have to have self-service. But you can do self-service the wrong way, right? You could have lots of different buttons that you're pushing, questions you're asking the self-service bot, and it just puts you in a big circle. So you need to develop a self-service organization that really knows how to handle the questions that are coming in. And when it has to go to a counselor, it can rapidly move to a counselor.
Yeah. And I think a lot of these technologies, because students are so savvy with technology these days, I don't think that we need to show them how to use a technology. I think they figure it out like quicker than anybody. I think we need to, when I talk about marketing out to them, I think we need to market out to them why they should use it. They might, until they actually use some of the technology, they may not understand the value it brings. So, there certainly are a number of people who are very, that still say, I don't want to use chatbots. I just want to call somebody. And even in that Gen Z, they're like that. But once they start using it and see it for the particular purposes, they will embrace it very quickly. But I do think that marketing is a good idea. Another area I wanted to bring up was generative AI. And, like I said earlier, this is an area where the students, or I should say colleges and universities, are not adopting this at the pace that other industries are. And I do think part of the reason for that is generative AI can be very dangerous at a university. I mean, you can enter, if you get some prompt engineering, you can have it write a whole paper for you and make a few changes and edits. And what are you learning then? I mean, that is, I mean, I know you're not doing yourself any favors by doing that, but that is a concern. So I think that a lot of universities are kind of like looking and trying to make sure that they're using this all in the right way and they have the right protections around it. So, right now we see about 58% of higher education using generative AI. Just to give you context, other industries, it's about 74%. So it's, there is definitely a big, pretty big difference there. That said, in education, though, there are a lot more apt to use predictive analytics than other industries. So, Joe, you were talking before about how they do these analytics and try and look at data points to predict what to do next, and they are doing that very well. So we do see data that supports that as well. Just things like understanding student trends and being responsive to their needs, delivering them personalized services, things like that. But with generative AI, I think today even, yes, creating content is an area that I think makes sense, but it's more about like, okay, I have a question in self-service, and generative create some articles, create some things for me to read or to learn from, maybe about a particular class, maybe about an event that's going on campus, maybe about ways based on and those kind of things you can get on websites. I don't want to underplay this. Like, let's say AI knows. I've answered some questions and I've communicated with AI, and it kind of knows a bit about me, my likes and dislikes, what makes me happy, what does not make me happy, where I get energized, where I don't get energized, am I an introvert or an extrovert, like all these types of data points. And it can kind of maybe guide me on, hey, here's some good weekend activities that would align well with you, Joe. Here are things that we think you would like. And love that idea for students, because to your point, it gets people more engaged, it reduces that dropout rate. And I think that that's pretty good. And by the way, within universities, colleges and universities, even though generative AI isn't as widely adopted yet as other industries, most people in higher ed, 73%, say that they trust it. They trust generative AI on a limited basis and to a lesser degree fully for anything. But other industries don't trust it that much. I think the trust is there. I think they're just really trying to fine tune some of the utilization.
I agree, Robin. That's a great next question, I guess. AI, how do we control it, right? And I think it all comes down to the knowledge base it's dipping into, and is paying a lot of attention to what it should be extracting. But that's for another day. Well,
Yeah.
Robin, thank you so much for this conversation. Really appreciate your time, and thank you everyone for attending. Have a wonderful afternoon. See you, everyone.
Thank you.